So professors are now being fired for teaching certain things because it seems to violate what President Trump thinks they should be teaching. It's actually not only just professors, but even deans too. Take a look at this headline here from Texas A&M. Let's dive into a little bit about what this really means, not only legally, but for the country at large. Before we do that, let me remind you to hit that subscribe button, make us the biggest and best legal analysis and political analysis channel that there is. So this is about Trump's ideas of what is proper gender ideology. Take a look at this executive order. It was actually one of the first ones he did back in January. And when you read over this, let's think about what's really going on here. So we'll just take a look at the first section here, but a purpose. Across the country, he says, ideologues who deny the biological reality of sex have increasingly used legal and other socially coercive means to permit men to self-identify as women and gain access to intimate single-sex spaces, activities designed for women, from women's domestic abuse shelters to women's workplace showers. This is wrong. Efforts to eradicate the biological reality of sex fundamentally attack women. Stop there. I can't read it too much more. But one thing you might ask yourself is like, how is it that you coerce people into allowing someone else to do something like self-identification? I mean, what kind of coercion is that? Basically, what that means is you should not coerce people into being tolerant, right? That's what it's really about, or being accepting of folks. So on first blush, this type of executive order, he finishes it, this is important, by saying basing federal policy on truth is critical to scientific inquiry, public safety, morale, and trust in government. I mean, that last bunch is such a bunch of gibberish of things put together. But what's significant legally here is that can be used by the administration to try to claim, oh, the education department says you're violating this idea, you're not properly teaching students, there's something wrong with your curriculum. And so that gives us the kind of legal foundation for all of the repercussions that start to happen. So let's take a look at this particular headline, which is the Texas A&M President, Mark Welsh, made an announcement that he terminated an instructor, most of the cool, and removed the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and head of the English department from their positions. And he said that it's not the content of the course that's at issue, which was an English department class called Literature for Children. It's that the course didn't meet the expectations and the description of the course didn't match its content. So that's what he claims is really going on. Now, interesting, Welsh is a former retired general, and I think it was Air Force, and he had some pretty high up positions, actually. So be curious as to what he thinks of Trump's purging of the military and what's happening at the military academies in terms of their indoctrination and curriculum, which we'll talk about in a moment too. But that is his stated reason for getting rid of the dean, getting rid of the instructor. And let's see what was this terrible underlying controversy that caused all this. So in a video posted by a Republican state lawmaker who was also a Texas A&M alum, a student starts filming during this class. And during this teaching session, the teacher seems to be talking about some differences in literature between gender identity and gender expression. And you can take a quick listen to it here. Not listen, you can watch it too and see what you think about that.
Just kind of a recap of our remarks on gender and sexuality. We read from last class. What did we didn't get to in our last class?
I just have a question because I'm not entirely sure this is legal to be teaching. Because according to our president, there's only 2 genders, and he said that he would be freezing agencies funding programs that promote gender ideology. And this also very much goes against not only myself, but a lot of people's religious beliefs. And so I am not going to participate in this because it's not legal, and I don't want to promote something that is against our president's laws as well as against my religious beliefs.
You certainly have a right to engage in things that you find righteous. And you suggest false.
Yes.
You are under misconception that what I'm saying is.
Well, can you explain to me how teaching us about gender identity and transgenderism and that there's more sexes than
gender isn't illegal.
Huh?
My gender isn't illegal.
Gender? What do you mean? Your gender is not illegal. According to President Trump's executive order, if you want me to read the paragraph in the order itself.
If you are uncomfortable in this class, you do have the right to leave.
Yes.
What we are doing is not illegal. And if you would like to make the claim that it is, you need to talk to the department head or the head of my department.
Well, I've already been in contact with the president of A&M, and I actually have a meeting with him in person to show all of my documentation tomorrow. But
we are also aware, and this is part of why there was an observer in class.
yes.
I'm not convinced that your proposal will be effective in stopping me from teaching things that are biologically true, because I do have the legal and ethical authority, all of the professional expertise in this classroom.
Okay. Yeah, no, I am.
So you'll see that the student's saying, I'm not entirely sure this is legal to be teaching because according to our president, there's only 2 genders, the student says. And then she references the idea that he might be freezing agencies' funding. One thing I like about this video is the utter disinterest of anybody else in the class. People aren't even turning around to look at her when she's talking about this. But she also raises the argument that it's somehow against her religious beliefs. Contrast that to the language in the executive order, right? It's talking about religious beliefs, talking about science, morality, who knows, right? And so she says, I'm not going to participate in this because it's not legal. The professor appropriately says you're under a misconception that what I'm saying is illegal. And then eventually the student leaves the class, and that's what the whole, controversy is about here. Again, the Texas A&M president is trying to steer clear of sounding like he's censoring academic freedom, which I think is exactly what he's doing here. But he says it's about academic responsibility in his message, which we'll put up for you. He says our degree programs and courses go through extensive approval processes. We must ensure that what we ultimately deliver to students is consistent with what was approved. I mean, there's nothing in here, and apparently the lawyer for that professor has said that no one said, oh, there's something wrong with your course content. It's not in agreement with what you said was going to be in the catalog. So it really seems like just a facade. And it's a facade, though, that's really getting at a much deeper, broader problem in terms of education and indoctrination, because that's what we want to focus on. The nonprofit PEN America, it's an organization that you may be familiar with. It promotes literature and human rights. They're counting some of the things that are happening in academia, and they say there are now 22 laws restricting what is taught. Those 22 of these have become laws in 2025. Here's a chart they're keeping of all the different efforts to apply censorship in academia. Now, the president of A&M is saying it's academic responsibility, right? That's his pitch. It's not censorship or restricting what you can teach. But take a look at some of these examples of what's being restricted. I mean, the idea you can't mention slavery, you can't talk about DEI issues. What about that is academic responsibility? It's all about the content. And when you combine that with the efforts at the colleges of the military academies, where they don't want certain speakers to come, they want to restrict the kind of content there, you can start to see the goal and danger of what this Trump regime wants to do. There's a reason why the slang term brainwashing exists, right? You have to first wash out, eliminate other thoughts to make the indoctrinee's head empty so that you can indoctrinate them with the idea of only be loyal to what Trump says, what the president says. It doesn't have to do with being loyal to the country, being loyal to the Constitution. And it seems to be working rather well for that student, right? Because what she says is the president says this sort of scientific, decision about there are only 2 genders. It's the president saying, what you can teach here, as though the president makes law, right? President does not make law. Remember, Congress makes laws. Fundamental misunderstanding on her part. And it brings up other historical precedents like this. I mean, we all understand that in authoritarian regimes, you want the people to be loyal only to the leader. But I'll take a look at recent China's example here, which was Mao Zedong's famous political campaign known as the Cultural Revolution. That started out very much as a political weapon he could wield to stay in power. There were some rivalries going on, some tense situation for his power struggle there, and he unleashed young, indoctrinated people called the Red Guards to further his thoughts. They would berate, criticize, beat teachers. There were murders, even rapes that happened, criticizing family members for being, quote, counter-revolutionary, for being wrong-headed in the way that they're thinking about things. This worked very well for him. He consolidated his own power through fear and intimidation, making sure that it was the loyalty to him personally, his own sayings, that counted. The collateral effect? It also created a generation of young people who had very little formal education, little training in critical thinking. And in China, they became known, that generation and the Red Guards, as a generation of empty heads. So that's something for us to keep in mind too. We'll keep an eye on this and other stories, and we'll talk to you soon.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.